Last week, the Office of Educational Advocacy received approval by the Wilmington City Council to start making a change. While Wilmington and state legislature are fighting for this movement, one speech that day stood out in particular. In a powerful message about how our current school system is failing Wilmington children, Delaware State Representative Nnamdi Chukwuocha stood up for his cause as emotions filled his face. Representing Wilmington's 1st District, Representative Chukwuocha has been a tireless voice for equity, opportunity, and reform in education. As an artist, an educator, and a legislator, his unique perspective bridges the gap between policy and the lived experiences of our students and their families. And tonight, he joins us on this show to talk about how and what is next for our city schools and the vision that he is creating and the City Council is creating for a brighter future for not only the city's children, but Delaware's children. Welcome to the agenda, Mr. Chukwuocha. Thank you. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you. I was there. You understand firsthand about Wilmington schools, not just the schools in your district, but like we brought up, it is schools in the entire state of Delaware that are failing, but Wilmington is truly standing up and starting with this office, of this advocacy office for education. And I've received nothing but good vibes about it. I mean, I'm excited to get it started. Were you shocked to get this information about the office? And I know that you were one of the people that put it into President Congo's ear to start something like this.
No, absolutely. I think that I wasn't shocked. I'm glad it's followed through. Council, as a former member of City Council, I remember vividly of feeling shut out from the educational process. Mm-hmm. And like we had no say or authority. It was at one point in time, 2015 maybe, 14, 15, the Office of Civil Rights basically found that Christiana School District was in violation of as far as suspension rates and just abuse against children of color. And again, we had no authority. But I reached out as the chair of the education committee to the superintendent, and I said, we want to have a forum. So he came and we were asked him about everything. And to me, that's what's needed for us to insert ourselves into this conversation. No one's going to say, oh, I'm willing to come, come on in, City Council. So that's what we've been saying to City Council. Senator Lockman and I created the Reading Consortium for Education Equity in 2018-19 when we first joined the General Assembly. And from the very beginning, we wanted the city to be involved, to reinsert our voice, because when we lost our school district, we lost our power and authority. There is no city like the city of Wilmington across our nation where we have this 4-district model, a failed 4-district model, and in particular that the City Council and the mayor have no role to play in the education authority of his children. It is senseless. It makes no sense. We need to change it. And I believe that this office is a first step in that direction to the city of Wilmington gaining its voice again to have a role to play. And I'm very excited about it. I think that, again, it's a first step, but so often today when I get down to Dover, there is a measure, a bill being voted on, I believe it's from Milford. And so often their city councils, their towns will send in a piece of legislation, their legislators advocate, speak for it, and it's voted on unanimously. Mm-hmm. So often that doesn't happen in Wilmington. It's like we don't have that voice from the city of Wilmington.
Why? I mean, you're down. You've been on both sides now. You've sat as a Wilmington City Council person, and now you're down in Dover. But I know that the city of Wilmington sent some things down there for this session to start, and still nothing's happening.
I think it's the role that we play in terms of understanding our commitment in our unification. We have to be steadfast, lockstep, working together. So often, even some of our peers in Newcastle County, I mean, we have to be Wilmington-centered, mm-hmm. because especially in terms of education, Many of the failed education policies were done at the expense of Wilmington. The Neighborhood Schools Act was all against Wilmington. When you think about the former policies like 9 and 3, where our children from the city of Wilmington were bussed out for 9 years, and then the children from the suburban areas came into the city for 3 years, even though that was probably the best sense of equity we had, because they wanted to make sure their schools were good. So we went to their good schools with good teachers for those 9 years. And then they wanted to make sure when their children came into the city that there was some equity, that we had good teachers. All of that changed with the Neighborhood Schools Act. So once we lost our power and we realized that the Neighborhood Schools Act was and it has continued to just decline in terms of overall performance for our students, in terms of the culture and climate within our schools. We're losing in every regard. And the gravest thing is the voice, just the representation in terms of the governance. This 4-district model has failed. And again, there is no voice for the city of Wilmington. Former city councilman Sam Guy created the legislation where we have at least one school board member who represents the city of Wilmington, but it's not enough. It's really not enough. We need a stronger voice. And so I believe that the Office of Education for the city of Wilmington can really help to be that voice for Wilmington, and help to ensure that our voices are consistent and that we're in lockstep working together, because this is the critical issue. We can't talk about violence, we can't talk about job creation, neighborhood development, if we're not talking about developing our children. This is our future. These are our most prized possessions, and this is the most valuable thing we have, are our children. And if we aren't caring for our children, how do we expect anything else to improve if we're not improving their educational outcomes in the settings in which they are being educated?
So when you're talking about improvement, and I love it, we can't do that without accountability. And I think some of what, and correct me if I'm wrong, what the city of Wilmington is talking about is having the Board of Education and these school districts be accountable for the proficiency scores that are being produced by our students, and asking the questions and getting a lot of questions answered that they have not been able to get in the past, and having representation come to the city of Wilmington and explain basically where we are. How do you think that's going to go over?
I think it's time for change, and for so long, our city's voice has just been silent on issues like this in terms of education, things that matter most to our children. When you had failed policies that have just continued, sadly, that has become the norm, where we just have accepted it. And where we accept it. And I believe that this is our chance to stand up, to say to my colleagues in the General Assembly, to say to the State Board of Education, to our mayor, to our governor, that it is time for a new day in terms of education for the city of Wilmington. We can no longer accept this failure. We just can't. And if we can't agree on anything else, this is something that we must agree on, because our children demand better. Our children demand better. It's one of the most hurtful things in my heart, one, to walk into our schools and witness this. Just, you can see the difference between some schools that are succeeding in that environment.
Explain that difference for the viewers.
That difference is, I'll take it from the very beginning. In Wilmington, we had our own school district, and I attended what is now the Eastside Charter School, which was then Martin Luther King School. I went there for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And then in third grade, I was put on a bus and bused down the Kirkwood Highway to go to Heritage Elementary School. Kindergarten, first, second grade, it was all I knew, but it was such a learning environment. It was supportive. Everything we talk about wanting kids to read by third grade, we were all reading by second grade. By the time we got to Heritage, we all were reading. We got out to Heritage, and we were confident in who we were. The schools really didn't want us there, but we were confident in who we were. So it began with that sense of having educators and community schools, that difference. Now, schools are just buildings in our communities. They're not truly community schools. They're not connected. So when you walk into a school, you you can tell some schools are siloed where it's separated, basically the same separation that's been going on forever, where you have the students who are doing well and the students who aren't doing well, those who need more supports. You can hear the difference in how we're being educated. It hurts, and it gives you a sense of just understanding that there is a grave need. And when you have that sense of challenge to where our children's sometimes don't feel welcome in their schools, parents don't feel welcome in their schools, the schools aren't connected to the community, where they're not addressing the needs. All of these are remnants, are factors that come from the neighborhood schools that compounded it, but from this 4-district model, to where schools were just no longer a part of their community. Schools need to be the heart of their communities. And when we don't have that, to where in my district, if you're on one side of 30th Street, you're going to Brandywine. Other side of the street, you're going to Red Clay. So that means kids right across the street from each other don't have that natural social engagement. They have it at home, when they're home, but then they go to school, they don't learn together, come back home, learning different things, different models, different curriculums. So it's a challenge for our school to be unified. It's a challenge for our city to truly, again, have a voice in the direction of our city and the education for our students. What we'll say to Dover is that enough is enough, that we can no longer accept this. So our core thing, we believe that since I would say early 2000s, it's been noted, probably before then, is that the city really needs to reduce the number of school districts that are operating in the city of Wilmington. There's been proposal after proposal after proposal from Senator Margaret Rose, from the Neighborhood Schools Act of 2000 to Senator Margaret Rose in 2008. We had WEAC in 15, 17, and then Reading in 2019 with our report. All of them has consistently said that our children should no longer be served by the Christiana School District. And we think about inequities. Those children get on the bus some 5:30 in the morning, going down to schools inequitably. And it'd be one thing if you're going to the greatest high schools in our state, you're not. Right. You're not. So you're being bused all the way down there for services that you probably can get a half mile up the street. And it's very disheartening. So what we've said is that we believe that the Christiana School District should no longer serve the city of Wilmington, and we need a reduction in the number of school districts. We want to have 2 or fewer partners that are truly willing partners to work with the city of Wilmington to put our interests of our students, our city first, because we haven't been a priority. Many of the legislation, whether it was intended or unintentional consequences, have harmed the city of Wilmington. We don't want to do any more harm to our city, to our students and families. We want willing partners who are going to work to correct it and work in the best interest of the city of Wilmington. That's what we want to say to my colleagues in Dover, as well as to the state board. And I think we're well on our way. The phase we are now in terms of Reading, our Reading Consortium, we're undertaking landscape analysis in terms of education for our communities. It's one thing to come up with the plan and say we need to do this, but it's another thing to really understand the needs of our students, families, and communities. And that's what this analysis will do. It help us to understand phase by phase what's needed in order to meet the educational needs of our students and their families, so that when we say we want things to change and realistically this is how much it may cost, then we're able to say and have data to prove and to show that this plan is being written in the best interest, and this is the best model. And hopefully, again, this office for the city of Wilmington, we in terms of Reading, invited Maria Cabrera, Councilwoman, to be a member of Reading. The mayor has a seat on Reading, so we're working hand in hand with the city in order to begin to move forward.
Right. What do you think? I think that the city council, the whole council, needs to go down to Dover and really have a discussion with the legislature down there about what's going on in city schools and set expectations and tolerances about what they're willing to accept and not. And I don't think that those conversations can have, but do you think that you can bridge and make that happen?
I wouldn't even say we need to. It's one thing that's great if they want to come down Dover. Even more importantly, we need that chamber itself to be engaged in this. Every one of our 9 schools that are part of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, each one of them are having parent and community councils So council members can start right there. Join that local council, parent and community council for your local schools. Join there so you're able to hear from the school leaders, hear from the parents in that schools, the needs of that school. So then you can advocate. Then you're not speaking for yourself, you're speaking for your constituents. Start there. Start there, because that's the voices that we need. We all need to hear from our parents. The WLC had a parent, their meeting last night, and a parent who, Miss Antoinette, from Bayard. She was a part of the Bayard School Parent Council, and she spoke so eloquently about the needs of that school and the challenges that are being faced with the administration. That's what we need. That's how this begins to change, when we begin to make our decisions and our legislation begins to be driven by the needs of our constituents.
And when we pack board meetings and we say, you know what, this can no longer happen.
You're absolutely right. On that note, in terms of, I mentioned about the old Martin Luther King School, and my father did a lot of work with Title I. I remember that Martin Luther King auditorium being packed, and it wasn't for, the school play.
Right.
It was for community meetings, for PTA meetings, and to get parents involved and understand what was happening at the current time. We don't have that level of engagement.
And they didn't have to get bribed with a lunch or dinner or some type of gift.
Everybody knew their role. And sadly, we all understood it, because of course with Title I dollars and that money was just starting to really hit our streets. So it was new, and it was able to provide jobs and resources. The former, rest in peace, Mr. Ted Blunt, he ran that Title I office and had parents all involved, being involved, understanding their rights and responsibilities of educators, but also the roles that they're supposed to play as parents. So it meant a difference. It showed, it made, as I said, myself as a young student, it gave me a sense of community, to where by the time I got on that bus and we went out to Heritage, I was already a confident student. I already knew what education was and wasn't by the time I got there. Our students don't have that today. We don't have that sense of community. We have lost so much with this 4-district model that it's time. It's time for us to make amends. It's time for us to truly provide some redress to this city that has been hurting so bad. And to me, it does begin, even though many thought it didn't begin with city council, it does.
It has to start somewhere.
I think that for council to understand what was taken between 1974 and 78 when they lost their authority, for them to begin to understand what was the role we used to play? Well, how did we do this? To understand that? And when they begin to understand that, they begin to understand what they can and can't do. There is nothing to say that council can't have a piece of legislation tomorrow to say we would like to have every school in the city of Wilmington opened up for after school and before school programming, and send that down to legislation, down to Dover. They pass it, we receive it, now it's up to our body, myself, Rep. Bolden, Senator Brown, Representative Ortega, for us to represent the city of Wilmington, and Senator Lockman to represent the city of Wilmington, to go and advocate for the needs of our students. That's what it would be. Or for something like that legislation to be incorporated into the WLC, or to be incorporated into the work of Reading. That's how we all work together to begin to formulate a true plan, and that will be sustained change that will address these needs.
Do your constituents in your district and throughout the state, I'm sure, you talk to everyone, do they understand, do they understand how bad it is?
I don't think so. And
that's why I'm always reluctant to ask that question, because I honestly don't think that Delawareans get how bad this is, especially if they don't have children in the public education school system.
Yeah, I think that, we tend to try to view our students in our schools today by yesterday's standards. When I was in school, it was this. When I was in school, it was that. Schools are so different. Communities are so different. Our homes are so different. Our students need us now more than ever. In my generation, we had Kingswood Community Center. We had churches that were involved. We had the Boy Scouts, and you name it. All of these organizations that were providing additional youth development and supports. Where are those organizations? Not to say that some of them don't exist, but they are nowhere near what they were in the 70s and 80s. So children need more. And unfortunately, we've turned to our schools to say, provide that more. And sometimes we think just providing resources, are we going to give more money for? It's not all about money. It's about having our school leaders having autonomy. It's about having the correct partnerships inside of our schools to ensure that we have staff who want to be inside of our schools.
And can teach.
Who can teach, and also where they understand the duties and responsibility of what it means to work in an inner city environment. That there is a difference, and that our children, our needs are different, and you must recognize that if you're going to work inside of our schools. And it means that you have to work within this system, not think that this system is going to bend toward your own philosophy for education. We need an urban education model, one that recognizes the needs of our students, recognizes historical traumas and the impact that the ACEs and so many other things have on our children. And until we get to that point where that's recognized, understood, and it's in every step of what we do, we're just treading water.
Yeah. And do you get that feeling when you're talking to the parents or you're talking to your constituents? Do they give you that sense of, because there's so many things that so many avenues and facets to this thing. Do they say, I don't even know where to begin?
That it has, I mean, you think about it, from 74 to 78, I mean, we're touching 50 years of this, and it's like, how are we supposed to unpack, just to say that, to one, realizing where our students are. So much is covered in data, and you know, we have our findings, and every other year there's a new report about education. So we just have to really think about the needs of our students. Our students deserve more.
Yes, they do.
And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting to bring forth change where, I mean, proficiency rates aren't everything. So when you look at a school and you say, oh, they have single-digit proficiency rates, we have to begin to say there are other ways to assess and measure our students, growth indicators for our students to show them that they are succeeding. Because if all I hear every day,
I have to disagree with you.
But if all I hear every day is that my school is failing, what does that say to me? So every day I'm going into a school, you're telling me that this whole environment, my whole neighbor, I see this, I see the drugs, I see the violence all around me. And then I go to school every day, and all I want to hear is that, oh, my school is deficient, my school is this, they want to close my school down, they want to do this. That it brings a certain psyche to where our students subconsciously think that devalue on education is them. Not the system, but it's the system that needs to change. The system needs to recognize the needs of our students. We can look at the data. I lived that world. I lived that world as a community and school-based social worker. I understand the data and the needs and the outcomes, but if we do not get to the very, very real and personable understanding of student growth, individual student growth. My good brother, rest in peace, Dr. Newton, over at Warner Elementary School, before he passed, he had a whole classroom dedicated to student growth. Their scores were here. He had every student's name on that room, and Ms. Hall is there now, but that they had this room, data room, and you can go in and say, I want to see Nnamdi Chukwuocha's reading scores and where we are. Will show where I started, where I am, where I'm going, what are you doing about it? It's that type of use, direct use of the data that matters. You can give me all the stats and I'm single digit, but if you're not doing anything, if the education inside of your school isn't geared toward correcting that, we're wasting our time.
But is the math still the math? And I understand that there has to be individual learning plans for these students that have deficiencies that are outside of the educational system that they're bringing in from home and their past experience, and I understand that, and I think that we need to address that. But there still comes a point where you need to be able to read. You need to be able to do basic arithmetic. Yeah. You need to be able to meet a standard that's able to be employable at some point.
No, absolutely.
And making excuses, it seems like, for are bringing up these obstacles, and they're true, but there still has to come a time when we know how to do fractions. We know how to read at a certain level. We know how to do these things. And if we don't, we're going to fall further behind, not even through the state of Delaware, but globally. Like, we're just not doing well.
No. I mean, I agree, and I think that, again, I think our major failure to me is just thinking, you know, there's this broad merit-based approach that this is how we're going to do it and everybody has to come to that standard. Everybody's not going to learn the same way. The education that you provide at this school, in this school, they may have our same goals there, but how we get there it has to be different. And that difference means that you begin to recognize the difference and you see those growth patterns that show growth and how this student gets from A to Z. It's different here and different there.
And I understand that, but not even our standards are high. So the standard that we're meeting isn't a difficult standard to meet, and we're not even meeting that.
All of that, anytime we get from Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind and all of this, when we're playing the standards or playing the tests, where it's not about the individual student. Again, we need, to me, begin to focus on individual student growth. When you begin to touch these students, recognize their own personal needs, that's when things change. You can look at the school-wide, system-wide approach all you want, but to me, that's where we are now. That's what's created these major gaps where our children, especially students in the city of Wilmington, are stuck in these gaps. And until we begin to address those individual needs of those students and families, communities, and schools, then we're just playing the same game. We're just playing the same game. So to me, it's about a sense of understanding where we are, looking at the system and how it needs to change, understanding fully how it has failed our students. And when we begin to look at that failure and think about ways in which we all can be involved, from the city, the county, the state, the federal government, things that need to take place in order for us for our children to begin to experience success. When they begin to experience success, that's what begins to change this, where education begins to mean something different. Talk about attendance. I mean, can you imagine when you and I were in the 8th grade saying, I'm not going to school anymore? It would never happen.
It wouldn't happen.
It wouldn't happen. I cannot even fathom somebody at Skyline Middle School saying, I'm dropping out. It just wouldn't happen. But nowadays, come on. It happens, and it happens
damn near
because
common.
There are systems in place that have allowed it. Yeah. Even before COVID, but COVID exacerbated many of those instances where students were home. It was distance learning, and I never got back on groove. And now I'm just not in the school system. So there are so many challenges that we face. But again, I think that our unity, our sincere focus on improving the educational outcomes for our children, it mandates all of us to recognize the harm that we've created and just try to address those things. My first day in Dover, I said, I want to have a meeting about undoing the Neighborhood Schools Act. Just undoing it. The Neighborhood Schools Act, for those who are unfamiliar, was basically a former representative, a white representative from the suburban area, said he did not want his kids to come into the city of Wilmington. I believe they were going to Bancroft or Drew Pyle, one of those schools.
I was part of that. I was coming from Newark to Bancroft.
And he said he didn't want that anymore. So that's what created the Neighborhood Schools Act. And they said kids should go to the schools where they live. Of course, that's great in some areas, but in other areas, you create high poverty, high need schools, racially identifiable, that are hard to learn and hard to retain qualified teachers. And so you created that. So that's what this legislation is. So for us to be able to say to our legislators, this harm that was done to our children, we did it. This body, the General Assembly of Delaware, did it. And it's up to us to fix it. We did it. We did it. I say that every time I get a chance inside that floor. And I'm thankful because my colleagues over the past 6 years in Dover have really listened. They've really listened. They've supported Reading. They supported the WLC in the efforts that we're trying to do to bring forth change. So I'm grateful. I think we're in a good place. I think having our mayor in place who understands from top to bottom the relationship between the city and state, I think we're in a new day. I really do.
Thank you so much, Representative Chukwuocha, for coming on and having this difficult conversation with us. It is very hard to talk about schools that aren't doing well and some of the problems that I think that we're going to face before it gets better. So I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this week right here on The Agenda.